launch of the report. Collaboration is key, but is it really as easy as working together? The IEP has worked really hard with a number of individuals across the sector, more particularly Dr. Jo Ingold and Teresa Scott, who are both fellows of the IEP. And we're also very pleased to welcome Louise, who's collaborated on the report as well today, to this session. So we're really excited to tell you and go through the report and advise what our findings are, what our recommendations are, what the things we've discussed. And hopefully this forms part of a wider conversation that will take place. I think both our authors will agree that this is not a magic bullet. It's a very, very interesting report and will create a great deal of food for thought. But collaboration is something that we need to be continually improving and moving forward on. And that's where I see the IEP working with its members across all areas of the employability world to do that. So I don't want to go on. So I'm really pleased to hand over to Dr. Jo Ingold, who will take us through the report.
Thanks, Scott. Okay. Teresa, did you want to say any words at the beginning, or shall I just crack on?
I just wanted to say a few thank yous before we get lost in the detail. Huge thank you to Louise from Kia, who is the business integration manager at Kia. So we looked outside of the industry and we've got an expert talking to us today, which is great. I wanted to say a huge thank you to Lord Evans for his support and the Institute of Collaborative Working for their support and collaboration in helping pull this report together. And we're delighted to have David's forward at the beginning of our report. And thank you to you, Jo. It's been great working in collaboration. So I think there's a brief running order which sees us go backwards and forwards. Jo is going to talk now through the survey results and some of the observations around that. Then I will talk a bit about looking outside of the industry, and I will introduce then Louise, and we'll finish with some questions. So it's a packed session, number 43, 44 of these Live Learn Lunches. Absolutely great session. So welcome everybody and enjoy. Thanks, Jo. Over to you.
Thanks, Teresa. And yeah, it has been a pleasure to work on this, and something that many of you will know is something I feel really passionate about, is encouraging collaboration amongst employability professionals and the sector more broadly. So, so Helen, if we could move into, I'll just get straight into the detail here. So we're drawing on a survey of IEP members and also interviews with key stakeholders, really, or key leaders in terms of collaboration in other industries and sectors to draw on learning. So there's kind of two parts to the report essentially. So I'm going to be talking about the findings from the survey of members. So this summary slide here is really nice in just capturing as a snapshot the kinds of collaboration that IEP members said they were involved with. So we asked them who they collaborated with, which organisations, other people, in terms of servicing customers, i.e. job seekers, and employers. And I'll return to that point about who are the customers shortly. So so in short, they were IEP members in the organisations that they were in, or in their own work, were collaborating with various organisations, including most popular collaborators, local specialist support, followed by local authorities, providers within supply chains, non-competitors, training providers, Job Centre Plus, and then providers outside supply chains. And that's in terms of servicing job seekers. And then in relation to employers, and that's why this figure is quite rich in detail. Providers within supply chains were the most common collaborators, followed by providers outside supply chains, and then organisations providing specialist support. So this provides us with just a snapshot as to what was going on. And Helen, if you move to the next slide, we can then dig into some other aspects. So I said I'd talk about the customers here. So what seemed to Teresa and myself in analysing the data and in looking more widely about collaboration in other sectors, including related sectors, was that from the survey results, there was definitely a focus on collaborating within organisations. So that slide I just presented talked about how IEP members did collaborate outside their organisation, but also in terms of because the survey captured both quantitative data, in terms of selecting responses from a scale, etc., tick boxes, multiple choice, but we also we had a mixture of open text and closed text questions so that we could get some good kind of qualitative data. So it was clear from the qualitative data that the focus was really on internal collaboration in terms of the richer detail here. So actually this speaks to some of the findings from my own research in the UK and Denmark so far, which is about what I call intra-organizational collaboration. So collaboration within your own organization, which might sound obvious, but as no doubt people on this webinar will recognize, that coordination between people who are employer facing, people who are job seeker or candidate facing, there's the extent to which they collaborate within the organization, how people work together is really important, as well as thinking about external collaboration as well. So I suppose Teresa and I came to this thinking all we're talking about is external collaboration, so what's called inter-organizational collaboration, but actually we found a mixture. And also important to highlight here that we are talking about 3 groups of customers. I think looking at the data, there was definitely a focus predominantly on servicing job seekers. But as we'll go on to talk about, and certainly in the report itself, we believe there are definite advantages to focusing on servicing employers through collaboration with other organisations and other employability professionals. So Helen, next slide, please. So just briefly reflecting on the barriers and risks of collaboration, or the benefits and risks of collaboration, or benefits and barriers. So clear benefits articulated were, in the words of one respondent, we all get a share of the pie. It was identified as being about collaborations about common purpose. It's about having kind of shared purpose in what you're doing, which hopefully a number of people here will recognise. It was also about win-win relationships. So this idea, again, reflecting on that, if we all work together, everybody kind of benefits. That was essentially the learning to take away there. It was about sharing best practice and evidence and learning about what works rather than reinventing the wheel, and likewise avoiding duplication of effort and resources in terms of providing coordinated and coherent and cohesive services to job seekers. But also it was recognised that avoiding employer frustration could be achieved by collaboration as well. Now there was talk, and I'll talk about this briefly, about the barriers, about the kind of boom and bust of the sector, which I was on the session that some of us IEP fellows had last week with NOUS about boom and bust in the employability sector and in terms of provision of employability services. So there was a sense that that collaboration could actually overcome some of the boom and bust. Obviously, we think of economics when we think of boom and bust, but actually, and I'll return to this point about commissioners as well, that aside from structural aspects, there are a lot of things that people can do within their own organisations, I think, in order to address some of these issues. And then there were clear workforce benefits articulated as well in terms of job satisfaction, retention, making the industry really attractive as well, which I know is what the IEP is all about, particularly in the work going forward. And I hope that we get some time to discuss that during this session. I did mention commissioners, so key barrier commissioners, that's not going to be a surprise to anybody. That's not pointing fingers at anyone, but generally talking about the commissioning frameworks. And also, I guess what we need to keep in mind here is that the IEP, as the body that represents employability professionals in terms of that workforce sector professionalisation and selling the benefits of the profession. I really want to focus on stuff that I feel that is more within the IEP's remit, you know, so workforce issues, commercial considerations, obviously key to organisations, but really I'd like to prompt everybody here and everyone who reads the report to think about what could be done to achieve collaboration through effective leadership, through addressing fear of change and the unknown. So I'm turning these barriers into some positives here. So addressing fear of change and the unknown that people might have in thinking about, how do I collaborate? I don't know how to collaborate. I've never done it before. There seem to be more risks than benefits. So really, I think there's a good program of work to be done addressing that. Barriers could be, we know that staff turnover can be high within the employability industry. It's even worse in Australia. So that's something that can be a barrier. But likewise, if we can get collaboration right, actually, there's a kind of cyclical effect on this in terms of workplace benefits. Lack of support, again, linking to leadership and management support, really important here in actually allowing people the capacity and helping them to build skills to in order to collaborate. Communication was a huge thing that came up in terms of lack of communication or poor communication, and I guess we can read that as being both you know, within organizations as well as across organizations. And finally, something that's come up in my own research is a lack of reciprocity. This is always an issue that comes up, and I think Teresa's going to talk to this shortly as well. So knowing that if you give you know, to someone else, that they're going to return it, and that's quite a challenge, and I hope that we'll be able to address that. Next slide, please, Helen. So this one here, we did ask members what they felt were the key skills and behaviours required for collaboration. And I think, again, just adding more sort of meat on the bones here to what I've said in terms of the barriers and benefits of collaboration as articulated by members. This is really, for me, and I think for us, where the IEP can really do some great work in helping members to build up these skills and to augment the skills that they've already got. So I'm not going to go through these laboriously. Everybody can see, I guess, what's there, and also read the report. And it's something that we'll return to at the end as well in terms of recommendations, particularly focusing on what the IEP can do to support its members. Helen, next slide, please. And then finally, this is my final slide. I just want to emphasize here that collaboration is not only within organizations and across organizations, so across teams within organizations and across organizations, but it's also multi-level. So it's about leadership and behaviors. It's about strategic organizational goals. It's about management support, and it's about skills, both of leaders, line managers, and also people at the front line delivering. So that is my final takeaway, and over to you, Teresa.
Lovely, thanks very much, Jo. Can I have the next slide, please, Helen? So I wanted to look at and touch upon the wider world outside of our immediate industry, because I do think, and certainly from my own experience, that we can be very insular as an industry, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on out there, and some other actually very timely reports, one just published in September from Nesta. So I looked at 4 other publications in informing my part of my research on this report, and I just wanted to share those with you and point you in that direction if anybody else is interested in reading more about it. So a really brilliant resource is the annual journal of the Institute for Collaborative Working. Our foreword is by Lord Evans. He is chairman of the Institute for Collaborative Working. They have been around for 30 years and they are renowned specialists in this field. So we certainly don't want to be reinventing the wheel when they have everything working so very well. The partner is a comprehensive snapshot of the focus for the ICW at any moment in time, and they publish it annually. And the current partner for 2020 explores collaborative leadership. And Jo just touched upon not having support from leadership. Collaboration is not something you can do a bit of. Collaboration, collaborative working is a whole systems approach, and Louise can tell you much more about that from a professional perspective shortly. But the Institute annual publication, The Partner, is well worth a look. The ICW have also produced an insights report into the principles on which the national standard for collaborative business relationships is based. ISO 44000, if anybody wants to look at the process and procedures side of it, and 44001 is actually the standard at which people are measured against. So the Institute are working around those standards and those principles, and they can give advice around that too. The ICW is recognised as a thought leader and a driving thought force behind any development around ISO. They follow something called the CRAFT methodology, developed for the collective experience of from ICW knowledge, and it was originally a BS standard in collaborative business relationship framework. So you can see a lot of work has gone into structure around collaboration, which I think we could all benefit from. The ICW continues to work with specialists, and Louise actually does some work with them around the communication side, and she's part of their wider network of specialists. The other reports that I've touched upon are Better Together, a Nesta report into how startups and the third sector can collaborate. That was published in September. It's a really interesting report into how smaller startups, and they don't have to be third sector, they can be for profit, particularly around the digital space, because there's a lot of innovation going on there, particularly during lockdown. And that report is about how they can work in collaboration to innovate and solve problems for established third sector giants like Save the Children, Alzheimer's Society, and a whole range of people have contributed case studies to that particular report. So it gives some really good practical stuff, and that's available online free. And finally, collaborative working, how publicly funded services can take a whole systems approach. That's published by the Institute for Government, Emily Mars and William Trott in 2011. And that's got some really interesting, insightful observations from around the world, looking at how organisations and governments have collaborated in different countries, which have informed a series of recommendations. And it's quite possible that that report, being 9 years ago, sparked off the interest in Cabinet Office and government departments around collaboration. So thanks very much to these guys for doing that. Next slide, please, Helen. So I wanted to share a couple of these case studies actually from the Nesta report. The World Food Programme organised a humanitarian hackathon in 2019 in collaboration with the Belgian government, which is quite an interesting collaboration, and Hack Belgium Labs. And during a 2-day event, small innovative tech startups and social enterprises built prototypes to address the humanitarian challenges facing the world. I mean, really exciting stuff. The winning teams had the opportunity to be reviewed by the WFP's Innovation Accelerator. You can find more details of that in the Nesta report, because we've got time to go into it in great depth now. But I think now is the time to seize the opportunities that are available to all of us around different types of collaboration and how they might solve problems. And we also touched in the report upon the new philanthropy capital comment on social problems are so complex and so vast they cannot be addressed by one organisation alone. And I think that's really evident during this pandemic, that it's taken some fantastic collaborations to come up with those vaccines that can make a difference to our lives going forward. They define startups as small, innovative, young, for-profit firms, ambition to scale, and startups are seen as a source of innovation, unencumbered, interestingly, by legacy systems. So, as I say, lots of interesting stuff there. Next slide, please, Helen. Another example can be seen in the UNICEF Innovation Fund, which was launched in 2016. That encourages innovation and collaboration with startups as well. and aims to help UNICEF innovate with emerging technologies. There's a lot of interesting stuff being done around digital. But looking more closely to home, we do have an external case study in the report, which has been provided by Morgan Sindel. Really interesting work around employability collaboration with an employer. So next slide, please, Helen. So this partnership came about, I think, a few years ago. It's a partnership for key recruitment specialists. There are two projects actually Morgan Sindel are involved with, specialist and labour providers, and I think some of you who are in that neck of the woods might know the Altogether Cumbria team. They look to create a positive social change, providing opportunities for local people through effective and efficient management of current and future employment opportunities. And I know that Andy Crowther has given us a very detailed case study of that, again in the report, and it's extremely interesting and very successful. I think they have a 70% success rate of people into work once they've gone through the programme. Another one that I found really interesting came about from the SME special interest group at the ICW. They've got a number of special interest groups, and I was looking particularly at the SME group and the examples of agility and innovation within the defence industry, who obviously also contract the government. So I don't want to upset Scott by talking too much about another institute, but I'll quickly touch upon that particular case study. And I was struck by the collaboration within defence, and one particular example which is cited in the report, where 10 to 12 smaller organisations have joined together to produce a weighty, agile, responsive, innovative entity, but it isn't reliant, as far as I understand, on one person taking the liability. It's a joint and several responsibility, and it's summed up well by the analogy that if one of those organisations bleed, then they all step in to stem the flow. And that is such an interesting model, because that then gives people the support and reassurance of being part of a bigger group, and you've got a much more adult relationship within that collaborative working model. And what is fascinating is that when that happens, standards are continually raised, because it's a dynamic environment and no one entity wants to be the one that lets the other one down. So you achieve that constant striving for improvement and continuous improvement in quality. And it's very powerful. And that's where you get to the stage where you're creating something that's much stronger than the contract you're involved with. And that's the really exciting thing to come out of this work. I think I'll leave you with David Hawkins' quote. Establishing a robust joint risk management programme as part of the operating process is a critical factor in being able to build sustainable and flexible operations. Evidence of a strong relationship is that the partners support each other's risks where practical, and that is different, in my experience, to some of the contracting we've seen within our industry. Next slide, please, Helen. I want to quickly touch upon what we found to be really important in terms of successful collaborations. There were 4 things, also identified by the Miles and Trott report: a common purpose, obviously in employability that's often a specific contract or programme, but it could be a specific customer benefit or employer benefit. A strong insistence on a whole systems approach. Now, this is something that might be new to some people, but it's definitely the answer to successful collaboration. It's not just an administration system, it's culture, values, it's much broader and wider, and that's where the standards are actually quite helpful. Shared power, that's, as I touched upon, not always something we see in current contracting, but truly shared power, not the ultimate liability resting with one organisation. Truly shared power, which gives everybody the same starting point. And finally, using the service user's perspective to stimulate change. And that's a critical consideration for commissioners when we're talking about our end user, which is normally the unemployed person, and how we can improve services for them to get them to work and keep them there quicker. And I'm just finishing off now, and I will hand over to Louise. And I'm going to finish with one of her amazing quotes, because disruptive collaboration is touched upon in the report, and it's one of the most exciting things. And I've touched upon it also around the digital sector. Organisations, small and large, are now moving towards disruptive collaboration to strengthen their internal capabilities, enable growth, and give them an advantage in moving from competitor to collaborator. Leveraging new partnerships pushes advanced opportunity. Thank you very much, Louise. Can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to be here today. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Helen, just bear with me. Okay, so this is going to be a whistle-stop tour of opportunities that I've been involved with. So what I call collaboration is working better together, because essentially that is what we are doing to achieve sustainable results in many, many different ways. So I'm Louise McMahon. I'm the Business Integration Manager, as Teresa's just mentioned, of Kia Highways. We're part of a wider group, but essentially Kia Highways are responsible, for those that don't know, are responsible for the strategic road and local networks across the UK. Our predominant client is Highways England, along with local authority clients, and I'm also an ICW, Institute for Collaborative Working, ambassador, advocating collaborative working and supporting wider knowledge sharing such as this event. And I'm also one of the advisory council members as well, so I get the opportunity to share and learn across many different industries through that forum. So thank you again for being here today. Please take a snapshot, and I'm welcome to share anything further after today if you wish to get in touch. So as I've mentioned, I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour about collaboration, and we at Kia advocate collaborative working both as part of our internal culture, one of our core values to be collaborative, both internal and external, and also from the very point of where we submit for work through our bid work winning teams, where we offer the opportunity to work together to create, develop small ideas into one big idea by working together, and one big opportunity to do that. And in relation to that point, I'm the Kia Highways collaborative integrator. It sounds very fancy, but essentially it means that I'm kind of seconded out to those that we win new contracts with. So some of our supply chain partners I would never have met, some I possibly work with already. And then I go out to facilitate sessions from the point of the first kickoff session prior to a spade going into the ground, so to speak, to facilitate a session to define our one way of working, our one common system, and our one goal in terms of what we can't deliver alone. So that's where I come into place, to go out and work with all of our supply chain partners to make sure everyone understands it's a fair platform, everyone has one voice, and the key measures and performance are outlined from the very beginning. So you're all aware at a relationship level what behaviours we expect from each other, and what we expect from the performance and measurement in terms of the delivery aspects, whilst retaining the key core fundamental behaviours that lead to trust, and also roles and responsibilities that define and outline how we can resolve issues and disputes a lot quicker and a lot more pragmatic than going through a lot of the barriers that we face in our work day-to-day life at the moment. So in relation to that, and just again, one of the examples, there's many, many examples that I could share with you, is in line with when I commenced working with Virgin Trains East Coast a number of years ago, and they wanted to implement collaborative working from an internal to one partner external to develop an innovative product. So we had the idea, but they had the skills. So we led to a one-on-one relationship whilst undertaking the principles of working together under the collaborative working ISO 44001 standard, to work towards a framework that is consistent in developing the right enablers that lead to success. However, on a larger scale, and one of the examples at Kia Highways is when I came in to work with them over 2 years ago now, I was given a project to draw together what we have named our Strategic Road Network Alliance. So that was originally made up of an existing community where, as you can see on screen, we used to develop our relationships at a traditional level where the client, Highways England, gave us the contract, and then we went out to our suppliers, our supply chain, tier 1, 2, 3, and then we divvied up the work, so to speak, which wasn't the most leanest way to do things, because there was a lot of people doing things differently to other people and a lot of misconception about what we were actually there to deliver. So we moved to an alliance model, which is where we brought all of our supply chain partners, including the client, into one room to work towards the future delivery of under an alliance model with what I mentioned earlier, one goal, one team, one ethos approach to delivery, which leads to acceleration across many different parts of the project or initiative. So this is the alliance model that I've mentioned. There is a link that I can circulate if you wish to understand the end-to-end journey. It was a 6-month process, which in essence, if you think of collaboration from an individual organisational level, it tends to take an organisation around 12 months to understand the standard, because no disrespect to the standard, but it is at times hard to interpret. So we've taken the approach to interpret what we do and fit it to the ISO 44 principles, which is what it is intended to do, but on a very simplistic basis. So we took our 24 individual partners, and on the left, it shows in the diagram, Highways England sat on the outside with our supply chain partners, and Kia Highways kind of divvied up the work and instructions to all of the people around the outside. When we moved to the alliance model, we brought everyone into the room and said, right, we all need to kind of reset and refocus what we need to deliver, because it was leading up to January of this year for a full asset delivery model, which is in essence an alliance model where everyone's working together and co-located. So we developed an alliance board, but in the interim, we set up a startup board to bring representatives from our supply chain, both with experience of collaboration in a formal or informal basis, and those who worked in this way, such as Kia Highways, do this as just as a matter of course, BAU. So we brought everyone in a room together, and during that life cycle, we developed a one common system that was accessible by everybody. It was shared to the individual organisations to use as well, because we were leading up to formal certification to badges up through the British Standards Institute that upon receiving ISO 44 accreditation, it instantly tells both internal and external stakeholders that you are good to work with, because you understand what it takes to work well together, which is linking back to the behaviours, the understanding your goal, etc. So during that life cycle of that project, we simplified everything right back. We held facilitated sessions with all of our partners in the room to begin with, because it's about that communication piece, which was mentioned earlier. Everyone had a voice. No, there was no stupid questions. In fact, we liked stupid questions because that evolved our ways of working even more so. And it led to the outputs of the Alliance entity being certified within 6 months, and a further 11 of those individual partners also being certified through the shared resource, such as myself, who went out to the 11 partners to support their management system development, and also embedding that culture within their organisation as well. So that whole ecosystem, both from the Alliance and all the 24 partners, the outputs of that was accelerated delivery. We met the target of asset delivery way in advance of the January target, and that was proof of the evidence in working together in an alliance model. When you all know what you're supposed to be doing and when and who you need to speak to from any organisation, leads to the acceleration in efficiencies, the shared resources, and also the strength in the trust to deliver and develop further opportunities, which has come through the alliance model since activation last year. One of the other parts of this, and what we've all been going through in terms of COVID-19, is we've all been kind of forced to collaborate without realising it. And one of those examples from the Alliance as well, and it's across 2 areas, and out of our highways areas in Birmingham and up to Basingstoke, is that during COVID-19, they already had set up governance to discuss, you know, what's going well, what's not going well, what can we improve upon, and to track and measure value creation. But they also came together as part of that standalone governance in place already to develop the ways that they can support each other during the lack of resources, lack of materials, throughout COVID. And that's just recently been awarded through BSI for an award a few weeks ago in use of the ISO standard to achieve that level of trust and governance that you can kind of shift and fit your people and your materials very quickly, because even though you're all 24 partners, you're actually all working under one alliance board. So the benefits of that have been massive, and they continue today. And I've got a lot more stories about that if you wish to get in touch. So just in terms of collaboration, it isn't easy, because sometimes you face different kind of understanding what collaboration means. What does the ISO 44 mean? What do the principles mean? Actually, what will it mean in working this way rather than just a transactional relationship? Well, the key part of it, and there's some on screen, is why do you want to do it in the first place? And for the IEP, and from reading the report that's been very comprehensively put together by industry specialists, is why wouldn't you want to do it? Because like I've mentioned, if you're all on one page, and you probably have already the kind of one common goal, but it's actually taking that back further and developing a harmonized system that instills collaborative working within internal in your organization, but also conveys that externally. So it's like pro-social modeling. You know, you see the benefits internally, so then you convey it externally, and then you can just develop your ways of working and the kind of goals that you have as an IEP industry, but also wider through DFE, for example. So there are lots and lots of different opportunities that you can undertake, and it doesn't have to be difficult. You just need to have that leadership commitment. And when I say leadership, this doesn't have to be, you know, top management. It's the people who are leading the focus of what you want to achieve as IEP, and who do you need to support the delivery of that goal, because you can't do it alone. So it's reinforcing that message that you need to work as a team even more so, and just restart, refacilitate and refocus the common goals and objectives, and it will lead to a very successful relationship and further opportunities being naturally formed. So I'll just leave you with, again, it was a whistle-stop tour, but I hold on to this as well as the statement that Teresa read earlier, that no one of us is as smart as all of us. And I have recognised that and seen evidence throughout the life cycle of the projects in instilling collaboration that I've been involved in to date. So thank you for your time. I don't know if you want to ask questions now, Teresa, or later on.
That's absolutely wonderful, Louise. Thank you so much. Spot on time. I think we are now going over to questions, unless Joe, you've got anything else to say. I think we're gonna throw it open to the floor and take any questions.
Yeah, I think let's take some questions and comments, and we can return to what the IEP can do. And we've got some data from the survey, but it'd be good to hear what people think who are on the webinar. And thank you, Louise.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me be here today.
Lots of really good comments, Joe and Teresa and Louise, but no question I can see at the moment. So let's have your questions in, please, on the chat.
Okay. Should we go into the recommendations then?
Let's do that, and then we'll give people the opportunity to get their stuff in, yeah? I'll be managing.
Thanks, Joe.
Excellent. Yeah, John, I see you've got a question coming. So shall I just, actually, shall we go to John if you've got a question?
Let's go to John.
Yeah.
Hi there.
John, if you... Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, we can hear you fine, John.
All right, sorry, I'm still looking at a screen, so I'm slightly disorientated. It wasn't a question, it was more of and I missed the first bit, and I haven't seen the report as well, so apologies for that. But this whole thing about collaboration is similar to what Mark Lee's been talking about for a number of years at DWP. And I think there's a couple of observations which I'm sure are familiar. I mean, I've certainly talked about this to some people on there previously. There's a thing which you might have seen from InLawGov, which was a number of years ago, the Institute of Local Government Excellence, which talked about the need to change the thinking and the behaviours of the professionals before they can affect service users. Has anybody seen that?
No.
And this was Builders Beyond Nudge. So this is a few years ago now. I think they'd got it from Stockholm. But building on that, certainly in my experience, some of this stuff, there's often an incongruence which comes from, and I think Jord made some of these points in the slide, between, you know, the actions of the commissioners which can be DWP or ESFE amongst others. And, you know, is this stuff in the too difficult box for them? Because there's a huge ask on the market in terms of what needs to change here, but really they've got to do some change as well. And if they don't have the appetite or the ability to do that, the market's not going to do it. So I don't know how, you know, how prevalent that understanding of you is or isn't, and what people think can or can't be done with that.
I'm interested in that, because I could say my thoughts about this, but just thinking of the Kia example that Louise was talking about, I'm just wondering from your own example, to what extent do you think it is a bit chicken and egg? I agree, John. It's kind of, if commissioners don't change the way they set the frameworks and the incentives they build, then, I mean, my argument is still a certain amount can still be done within organizations. But Louise, does that make sense to you from the sector you work in terms of, if you've got commissioners of services, to what extent can that hamper you, or is there still space to still behave in this collaborative way?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be barriers, and obviously in terms of collaboration, we've been trying to influence their need to instill collaborative requirements within kind of their procurement standards, and that's just coming through at the moment through the launch of the construction playbook yesterday. In line with, you don't have to follow regulations or someone telling you have to collaborate, and internally and through delivery to our partners, whether it's a formal or informal basis, we always start out any project delivery or formalised contract award through the principles of collaborations in a short 8-page document called a relationship management plan that underpins our key joint requirements to delivering of the project end goal or the contract for the customer end goal. So we always instill this way of working, regardless of someone saying we have to or can't do or are hindered by, because we as an organisation have realised the benefits massively over the last, God, about 9 years now. We've been driving and beating this drum, really.
Wonderful. That's really helpful, Louise. Thank you. I've just realised I got through the whole session, John, without actually talking about co-opetition by name, which people will be shocked about, but I have been talking about it. It's in the report, and I've got the reference in where I first talked about it in relation to employment services in 2017. So, Teresa, would you like to come in there?
I think that you can have very strong local collaborations that can then become bigger than the original contract you're working on. I can think of examples in my own past where we pulled together local delivery agents, local support services around a customer, ACCA circle of support, and it's become quite a strong collaboration, and then has implications for other things, for other funding, for other contracts. So I think however small you start, a collaboration can grow in strength and be bigger than the original intent. And I think I've definitely seen that in all of my research outside of the industry. It can become very strong.
And the one thing,
looking at you,
sorry, Teresa,
set the standards.
Can I just come in there really quickly as well? I think, John, in answer to your question, I suppose in a way, and building on what Teresa and Joe said, I think there's a real ambition to make change here from a commissioner perspective and from a provider community. There's no doubt. I mean, one of the reasons I know that is that the IEP has been working with DWP on 6 work streams, and one of which was collaboration. And ultimately that predicated this report. There's lots of conversation about it, there's lots of talk, there's lots of action, and I believe that will ramp up over the coming months, there is no doubt. There's also belief in and an understanding that maybe contracting and commissioning potentially could be done in a very different way. But clearly at the IEP, and the really important thing that I want to say is that we support people across all levels of the employability business, and it's up to us as individuals to try and make that space. it's really important. We know it's good for service delivery. We know it's good for the end user. And ultimately, we are in a position now with an open door where we can enable change. And I think, you know, that's sometimes difficult. I know that. And I'm not saying naively that it will be an easy process, but ultimately we are in that position where we can drive this forward together.
Thanks, Scott. I think if I may put my other 2 pennies worth in there, if we just wait for commissioners to drive this, we may be waiting some time, or it may not go in the direction that is, or it may go in the direction that is maybe not what other sectors demonstrate is kind of the optimal for effective collaboration. I'm thinking particularly what Teresa and I say in the report, and particularly Teresa's work looking at other sectors, is that there shouldn't be any coercion involved in collaboration. It has to come actually from organisations, as I think Louise's example has really demonstrated.
Can I just come in? We've got a couple of more questions,
Yeah.
and 2 that are related, both from Jeff and Mark in a way. So Jeff's asking, how often do we start from the end user perspective? I would normally have got Jeff in, but we need to kind of move on, don't we? So, and Mark Cousins asking, the personalised model seems very compelling to me when fundable. So I think Jeff's point around the end user perspective is really important. Could you answer that, Joe?
Yeah, end user perspective, but then who is the end user as well? It's got to be, Jeff, I agree that it's got to be the individual, the job seeker, but also thinking about employers as well as end users, and making, and I think that is what really can drive collaboration, is if we actually put those end users at the heart of what we're doing, then actually collaboration absolutely makes sense. And when you think of that whole systems perspective that Louise's example has, I think, illustrated, and what Teresa has said, it that hopefully should drive us in the right direction. I'm not sure we necessarily always have the space for that at the moment. Just looking.
Okay, thank you. Just checking out. Yeah, Mark's agreeing that employers in that alliance board is really important. I know that would be music to your ears, Joe, absolutely, and to all of ours, to be honest. I think we can possibly get a couple more minutes at the end with some more questions, but we've moved through those quite swiftly. So I wonder if we want to move on to the next, the final stage around recommendations, Joe?
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, so this is what came out of the survey data, which was about developing framework. So, for example, that speaks to the work the IEP is doing around practitioner standards and accredited modules on collaboration to support building of skills. There was also a recommendation about having regional forums, which speaks, I guess, to Teresa's point as well about that kind of local and regional sort of bottom up, really getting communities of practice going about this, because I think that's how change can be driven as well. So training more generally in terms of aside from accredited modules, short-term support for local partnership network building was specifically mentioned. Sharing of case studies. I mean, we've shared a couple of examples in the report that came out of the survey, and plenty of examples from other sectors, which I think we definitely shouldn't, as a community of practice of employability professionals, be afraid to draw on those other case studies, but really sharing examples of good practice to show how collaboration can actually take place. Otherwise, it will always be put in the too hard box, I think, and we'll be doing ourselves and job seekers and employers a disservice. And then building of employer networks was another recommendation, which is obviously music to my ears again. So and again speaks to research that I've done about that collaboration amongst employers. And finally, research, evidence, learning, knowledge. The collaboration is going to enhance that. So putting aside the kind of any idea of a race to the bottom almost or I think someone put something really nice in the report about and it speaks to the sharing of the pie amongst everyone. So just sharing good practice to provide better services. I think, Helen, have we got one more? So this is just underscoring the point that it's about collaboration and learning, which I think we'll all agree is what the IEP is about as well. And I'm just looking at the chat. Yes, Colette, please do send questions, and this is just the start. Teresa and I are looking for examples, for case studies, for evidence, and really this is intended, I was going to call it a discussion paper or a provocation paper. I hope that this stimulates thinking, and it's definitely not the end of the conversation, but it's just the start.
I think that segues really well, Joe, into Mark's question, which I missed further up the chat, which was about JCP being the linchpin organisation to drive collaboration. I think they are very significant in this aspect, but they are a significant part of a much wider system. And actually, to be honest, if we can all collaborate together, then that's clearly really, really important. And those relationships are really important. And Mark's asking about a formalized role for JCP. And I know you've done some work mainly around the employer stuff and also claiming stuff, and we'll come in and ask Teresa in a moment. But I just wondered if you had a point about JCP's role in this, Joe.
Yeah, I do, and I agree with what you've said, Scott. But one thing that has struck me is that I often am concerned that, so I don't want to talk out of turn, but that within DWP there's maybe and JCP there's not an appreciation of the wider ecosystem in which they sit. And I know some IEP members are Job Centre Plus staff, and I think the more, and we have, I know people who work really well as providers with their local job centre and find that, and we could see that actually in the survey data. But I think the more we need to really push the idea that, as you put it, Mark, actually it's an ecosystem here. It's an employment services, employability ecosystem, and I think breaking down those silos is definitely to be recommended. I'm just looking at Mark's comment.
I think
Teresa,
when I've worked, when I've worked in collaboration, particularly around employer-led programs, JCP have been part of the collaboration. I've talked before about the Met Police program we ran for 4 years, and JCP were very much involved. There were 3 of us. It was the Met Police, JCP, and ourselves as the provider, running that very closely, shared responsibilities. You know, people respected each other's roles, and it worked very, very well. So I know that it can do, and I have seen those models work particularly well around the employer piece. And I think sometimes JCP are grateful to have a good provider working with them as a catalyst to the employer, and translating their part of it, and then translating the employer's part of it. And that's quite a critical role, and that's a critical opportunity for people to collaborate at the moment, I think.
Thank you, Teresa. Absolutely, and lots of comments coming in, lots of people agreeing with what you guys are saying, and also with a number of the things in the chat. I don't have any further questions, but I think yeah, John's come back and said, we need more desire from that part of the ecosystem. I think, and as Biddy Oselston said, that Job Centre Plus is often very good. And I think those localized relationships, as Teresa stated, are normally very, very good. But it does take some effort, there's no doubt, and it takes effort on both sides. But it's really important to do that. We do have a couple more minutes left for people to make statements or ask questions. We won't be running over time today, which is fantastic. So thank you very much, everyone. Everyone should have a copy of the collaboration report in their inbox if they pre-registered for this. If you don't, please shout out and make sure that we get that to you. It goes on public launch later on this afternoon. And whilst people are thinking about anything else they want to say or anything else they want to ask, can I remind everyone, please, that in the spirit of collaboration, and whether you celebrate Christmas or not, we have a little get together on the 23rd, where everyone can come together and have some fun, do a quiz, and just kind of kick your shoes off just for a little while, and have a chat, and hopefully it's one of the last few days you're working before Christmas. So we're really happy to invite everyone who's a member of the IEP or is through their employer to come along to that event. So I just wanted to remind you that. Everyone's saying great sessions, that's really good. I don't think there are any more questions. So, sorry, John.
Just a quick grenade, if I may throw it in. at the end. What do we do if some of the aforementioned people who will remain nameless, it's not a question of desire, it's a question of competence or capability?
I think we are now looking into the training, the support that we then give as a result of the findings in the survey. We're not stopping here. This is the start. It's not a catch-all. It's not a solution. You're not going to read the report and find all the answers to suddenly collaborating with everybody in your industry. It's much more a starting point to initiate these discussions, to look at what is needed by the industry.
I'm sorry, Teresa, I mean, if you've got senior civil servants who are in a job that they are incapable of doing.
That might well be your opinion, John, but I think the collaboration that I've come across outside of our industry with industries that are working closely on government contracts, very big government contracts, there are a number of lessons to learn from that. One, the length of the contract can determine the strength of collaboration, because longer term contracts do tend to generate obviously a longer term for a collaboration to mature. So I think perhaps DWP could learn from those lessons, and obviously we will be presenting this to them. But I also think and firmly believe that those collaborations that are very successful become bigger than their commissioner, and that's what you're aiming for. We're not aiming, if people are on this journey because they only ever want to contract with DWP, I think that's quite a limited future. I would like to see people looking at collaborations that build bigger solutions, which is what we touched upon from some of the other work externally. So it's not going to solve that problem, but we are certainly going to put some of those solutions in front of them and hopefully point them in the right direction too.
Yeah, I think a very good point, and good points made across the piece. Thank you very much. And the last thing I'll say is we can contribute and make change and influence what we can influence, and ultimately that's our reason for being here. We're going to try very hard to enable this. As Teresa said, this is the first part of a conversation, and it's really important that we move on from this and that we take a number of those recommendations and start delivering that through our fellowship, through our membership, through the wider IEP network. I think there's some really interesting things to do there. Look, I'm going to bring the session to a close. Can I say a massive thank you to everyone that's attended the session, and also really importantly to Teresa Scott and Joe Ingold as co-authors of the report. To all the contributors, including Louise, who's been on the call today. Thank you so much, Louise, for your time. That was really, really helpful. Thank you. And to all of you that take the time to read the report and enable that as a catalyst to make some change and to just start doing some things that maybe you thought weren't possible prior to reading it. As we say, it's not the magic bullet, but it's a really great place to start. So thank you very much, everyone. See you all soon. Join us on the 23rd. It's going to be fun. Jingle and Mingle, I believe it's called. So there you go. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you soon.